welcome everyone to ANC3F meeting. I will call the meeting to order. I'm going to do just a quick roll call right now. Commissioner, I see Commissioner Alex Appa,
Present.
Commissioner Van Wall,
Present.
Commissioner James Tenderick,
Here.
Commissioner Deepa Mehta,
Here.
Commissioner Monica Nemeth,
Here.
and Commissioner David Castillo.
Present. Good evening.
Good evening. Let me go through today's agenda. I have it back here. Can I get an approval on today's agenda?
Motion to approve?
Second.
I was hoping to add an quick amendment to make the UDC bill increase funding a resolution to vote on it. Because I think it's under information items. I'm making an amendment to make that part of the regular agenda action items.
I mean, I think, let me see. I mean, I don't think it'll prohibit us from actually voting on it.
Okay, never
Okay,
mind.
I mean, well, let me see what we could do. Yes, I mean, we can make it the first item under the action items. Don't know if do we need to vote on that to make that happen?
We can just simply move it, and we can just agree that we're moving item number 9
I mean, it would say item number 9.
up to under action items.
Okay, so the motion would be to move to move item number 9 into action items.
Yes.
Right, and we don't need a separate motion for that. We just agree that we're doing that, and then if we agree on that, we just approve the agenda itself as modified.
Okay, so do we should vote to move it to the action items?
So what we do is we would withdraw, so whoever motion would modify the motion or withdraw the original motion. Say a new motion would be to approve the agenda as modified.
All right,
Motion to approve agenda as modified.
Second.
all right, all in favor to approve the agenda as modified?
Aye.
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 All right, any opposed? All right, the motion is approved. Thank you.
Well,
All right, so we will then go to approval of the agenda, approval of our minutes. Can we get the minutes have gone out to all the commissioners from last month's meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from March 15th?
so
Motion
moved.
to, so moved, yeah. Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, so the motion passes. Thank you. We're now into quarterly reports. It was sent out to all of the commissioners. Are there any questions about the quarterly report?
I do apologize to my fellow commissioners for the delay, but there's nothing remarkable this month. The main disbursements were payment of personnel costs for our admin accounting support, as well as payment for our ANC3F coach. So those were the big payments that went out in the first quarter of 2022.
And then you mentioned the red is basically, so the number here is actually in red is actually correct.
Correct. There's an error in the template, the QFR template from OANC that we need to get fixed, but the data is correct as presented.
And okay, and so the number is basically $62,087.80 minus the $7,747.32 equals that 54,000.
Correct. That was our ANC funds as of March 31st, 54,340.48.
All right, any questions from the commissioners?
I will also note that we did not receive any grant applications, in accordance with our twice yearly application process. So just want to remind folks that our next application will be due, I think it's October 31st. And we'll send out reminders later in the summer for folks who might be interested in applying for grants from the ANC.
And then remind me again, Commissioner Wall, do we need to vote on this quarterly report?
It's part of our consent agenda.
Right, okay. Just double checking.
Mhm.
Thank you. Commissioner updates. I will start with Commissioner Namath. And then I'll go to Commissioner Wall and then Commissioner Castillo.
I do not have anything for 3F06 this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Wall.
Yes, thanks, Chair David. I have one announcement to remind folks of this coming Saturday, April 23rd. MPD, Metropolitan Police, are hosting a family fun day at Forest Hills Park. That is Saturday from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. It'll include music, activities, food, giveaways. McGruff, the crime dog, will be there. So really invite folks, actually anyone in the community, to come out to that event. And really appreciate MPD's outreach to create better connections with the community and show their commitment to the community. I'll paste a link in the chat to the flyer that's on our website, but would love to see lots of folks out there on Saturday afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Wall. Commissioner Castillo.
Thank you, Commissioner Chair David. I have a couple of announcements, and if you allow me to share my screen, I do want to share. Some. Whoops. Hang on. I'm a little clunky tonight, so. Can you see what I'm sharing, or is that?
Not yet.
So this is, safety comes in many different forms. And those of you that have been driving along Van Ness recently may have seen this. This is a small victory that's a credit to Robin Maher, David Fahy, Justin Smith, Erica Rosenberg, Bob Dealing, the Streets and Sidewalks Committee, Christian Pinheiro, and Mary Chay's office. This was a resolution that I think we passed, I think it was either late last year or early this year, to try and make traffic calmer on Van Ness. So hopefully this is one step in the right direction, the 20-mile-an-hour speed zone. So those signs went up real recently.
Quick interruption. We can't see the we can't see your screen. You think you're showing it? You're showing it.
How's that?
See it now. Thank you.
A little bit better.
That's good.
again, if you're traveling down, up and down Van Ness Street between Reno, actually between Connecticut and Wisconsin, you should see these. So
Oh,
the next
wow, great.
little piece of good news. We're also, I was working with a group of neighbors, Corey Levine, Jane Paul, Hans Mueller, Erica Rosenberg, DDOT and DGS staff. This is the Idaho Avenue right-of-way, kind of as an offshoot of the Hearst Park and Pool project. We met with a group of neighbors to try and get, this cleaned up a bit. So this is what the path looks like now. It's a lot more bike and pedestrian friendly, and it goes all the way from essentially Idaho to the south to, I guess it's probably Tilden on the north.
Are
And then
you showing a new screen? We can't see it.
Oh God, I'll get there.
Okay, no problem.
How's that?
There we go.
So this is looking towards Idaho Street, looking south. And this is the clearance that they did on the path. And on the right side, you can see it looks like a piece of wood. This is actually a natural bench that folks put out there, or that actually staff put out there.
Oh, wow.
And then one more, if you'll bear with me. This is visual night. And this is the steps, this is the steps leading down from the new park, crossing the path and then down it to the edge of Springland Lane. So this is something that they patched the cement and they put in new railings. And again, it's much, they did a lot of clearance. So again, congrats to the small group of neighbors and then DC staff that made that cleanup. So that's all I've got for tonight. Thanks.
Awesome, great work. Thank you, Commissioner Christil. Commissioner Appa.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I have two quick announcements. One, I had an opportunity to speak with Howard Law, I think late last week. They've been obviously wonderful partners in the community. One thing I did want to remind our community here is Howard Law does not allow dogs on anywhere on the campus. So I know as a dog owner myself, there's a back field that's incredibly large. And I know many people like to walk their dogs there. They're going to be taking down those signs that say, no dogs allowed on campus. And however, they want me to remind the community that that is not an invitation to allow dogs to be walked on their campus. We just want to make sure to be respectful community members. It is private property, so just want to remind everybody of that. And secondly, I know Claudette and I are working on a newsletter for May. So we are going to be sending out an ANC-wide newsletter that will provide updates around when the meetings are, important things that we should know in the community. So we're really working on the effort to increase the amount of communication that we're having to the public. In addition, we do have an Instagram page. We're working on updating our Twitter page. And finally, we do have a LinkedIn that we are working on. So we are working on having better communication with the public. So I just also want to say that that's upcoming in May. So we'll be sending out a link hopefully shortly so that folks can sign up for the newsletter, and we would love if you could share widely.
Thank you, Commissioner Appa. Commissioner Tenderek.
Hello, everyone. My only announcement is that, so it's just another redistricting updates. So last month, the Ward 3 task force, they have officially made the proposal for the Ward 3 boundaries. It's pretty much the same map that I showed last week. I'm going to put in the chat what were the borders for it. Now, next step is that it has to be approved by DC Council, which will be sometime next month or in June. So I'll keep y'all updated, but essentially the task force, which they really had done such incredible job. They created a really comprehensive in-depth report as to what the SMDs will be and pretty much all of Ward 3, but also in 3F. And so I definitely encourage you all to have a look at it, to make sure to check it out. If you have any concerns or questions, just please let me know. That's my only announcement. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sanderick. Commissioner Meta.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. I just wanted to follow up on an effort that began last fall to improve traffic safety conditions in Forest Hills. As some of you will recall, with the help of some extremely active and thoughtful residents in Forest Hills, we did a walk around with DDOT liaison for Ward 3, Mr. Christian Pinheiro, and at the time, MOCR Tony Donaldson. In late January, we submitted a pretty lengthy and I think well thought out memo to DDOT with some specific traffic calming measures that were requested, ranging from replacement of stop signs to more painted striped walkways to certain traffic being diverted during rush hour so that cut through traffic would be limited through some of our more heavily trafficked streets that are with pedestrians and bikes during rush hour. Recently, that effort has led to some more specific questions from Mr. Pinheiro. He is working hand in hand with various constituencies within DDOT that have responsibilities for particular measures, and we are hoping to get some results very soon. So for anyone who thought maybe that was backburnered, it's not, it's ongoing. And we continue to try to drill down on what makes sense and what doesn't, working directly with DDOT. So thanks, and thanks to everybody in Forest Hills who has been incredibly helpful in supporting this effort. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Commissioner Meta. And just want to remind the community as well that DDOT is, they're going to be at UDC this Saturday as well from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. to talk about the Van Ness Commercial Corridor project. So you want to just take a picture of the screen real quick. And then here is the flyer for the event with MPD that Commissioner Wall mentioned. That's Saturday at 12 p.m., 12 to 4 p.m. So you can go there right after you go to DDOT's event. And then on Tuesday next week, there will be a crime prevention training with MPD. And you just email Ms. Samantha Nolan at nolantutor@yahoo.com to just learn about, how to start a neighborhood watch program, how to prevent crime and decrease the likelihood of becoming a crime victim. So these are some of the events that are coming up within the next week. Commissioner Wall, Treasurer's report.
Yeah, actually, I don't have anything further beyond the quarterly report that we discussed earlier. So this will be
Okay.
extremely short treasury report this evening.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Wall. All right, now we'll be moving on to the committee reports. Have we got anyone from the Streets and Sidewalks Committee? Have we got anyone from Parks and Watersheds Committee?
Yes, this is Erica Rosenberg. I'm here. I don't really have an update. We had a very productive meeting last month with DC Water, updating us on soapstone. They were great and very responsive. We have another meeting to address all the issues that we didn't get to address because DC Water was speaking to us last meeting. And I did want to thank Commissioner Crystal for all his work on that right-of-way behind Hearst, as well as personally, although it's not involved with Parks and Watersheds, for the Van Ness traffic effort too. So thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Have we got anyone from the Schools and Universities Committee?
I can speak for the committee. Pretty much our only main updates is pretty much in our resolutions happening tonight. So both the one for the Levine School of Music, as well as the UDC resolution for more funding. That's been sort of like our big focus the past month. And we're gonna kind of go from there and continue planning an event in the summer, a volunteer event with Savon Donovan, as well as sort of keep in contact with all the schools and universities. And of course, Commissioner Appa is still in contact with Howard Law as well through this whole process.
Thank you, Commissioner Sanderick. have we got anyone from the Housing and Neighborhoods Committee or any commissioners that could speak to the Housing and Neighborhoods Committee? I just want to remind the community, we are always looking for volunteers, and you can get more information on when each committee is meeting if you just go to our website at ANC3F.com. Community updates. Have we got anyone in the community with any updates?
Yes, Juanita from UDC.
Hi, Juanita.
Hi, here, let me turn my camera on. Maybe. Well, I turned it on, but I don't know if it is on, so I will just keep speaking. I'm not sure if y'all can see me or not.
Yeah, we can see you.
It is on, yeah.
Well, I can't see myself, so that's.
We see you.
So I would like to start with the semester is obviously winding down. We're headed into commencement. Currently, the university plans to have in-person commencement at the convention center. We are looking at the new variants that are happening with COVID. And apparently there is a 150% spike in cases in a district. So we may have to adjust if things change dramatically. So we'll keep up to date with that. Let's see, the farmers market will be starting on Saturday, May 7th. So I don't know about you all, but I'm excited for it. I miss my fresh produce and fruit and fun, yummy food that we have at the market. The next community campus task force meeting will take place next Wednesday, April 27th at 6:30. I am going to put in the chat a link for anyone who has questions that they would like addressed at the meeting or any concerns that they would like addressed at the meeting. Please feel free to fill that out and I will make sure that those things are addressed. And then I'll also put in a link for you to have access to the WebEx meeting that's going to take place. I'll also send it to all the commissioners so you can send it out to all of your constituents. And then lastly, just some exciting news. Our UDC Law's clinical program was ranked #5 in clinical training in US News and World Reports graduate school ranking. So we're pretty excited about that. And then lastly, as our student athletes wind down the semester, we encourage everyone to attend any on-campus games and go out and support our Firebirds. That's all I have unless there are questions.
Any questions?
Will the task force meeting be virtual or in person?
It'll be virtual. I'll be sending out a WebEx link to all of the commissioners and to Van Ness Main Street and Forest Hill Connection and ask them to put the link out to the community. And then it'll also be on our website up under the calendar.
And I'm sorry, Ms. Gray, you said what time on the 27th?
6:30. I'll put everything in the chat.
Okay.
Hi, Juanita. This is Monica. My next door neighbor actually teaches at Franklin Montessori, and she is interested in wanting to know how she could potentially make use of the amphitheater so the kids could do a presentation for their parents and such, and they just need that outdoor space for probably like an hour or a couple of hours sometime next month. And I was going to have her contact you. But is there a better contact potentially?
No, actually have her contact me and I'll get her in contact with our space reservation system or team. We have a lot of schools who will rent our spaces for their commencements or programs and things like that. So just give her my information and I will connect her to the right people.
Perfect. Thanks.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you,
everyone.
Juanita. Thank you. And Gloria has her hands up, and then we'll
Yeah. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Gloria Garcia, Van Ness Main Street. Have a couple quick updates. One of the things that Van Ness Main Street does is provide technical assistance, marketing assistance, but we also provide direct cash grants, and we just completed our fiscal year 22 grants, and we have given out nearly $39,000 to 11 businesses. And we have given out a grant most recently to the new business that's going in the Tesoro space, which is the Days Inn. It's called Flavor Garden, and we are going to help her to open, and she hopefully will operate in the medium term. But she's put in a lot of work, and it's our first African-American woman-owned business, and she'll be serving American soul food. She's also going to try to do cooking classes, which she used to do at her former restaurant. So we're very excited to have Deidre Holiday White join the corridor of businesses. The other thing I want to remind everybody about is that Forest Hills Connection is celebrating its 10th anniversary. And on Saturday, also we'll have some activities. They're going to start with a 4 p.m. tour of the Linian Stream, which was one of the first things they reported on 10 years ago. Anyone who wants to meet at 4 p.m. for a tour of the stream, it's at Broad Branch Road and Linian. Then from 5:30 to 8:30, Comet Ping Pong Pizza will be hosting and providing free pizza for a party to celebrate. And then at 8:30, Marlene Berlin will hopefully have a group go back to listen to the frogs at Linian Stream. So our next big event is May 7th, which is the pop-up gallery, pop-up market. And then also May 6th is our annual meeting. And we are still trying to decide if we have it indoors or if we use the amphitheater. So we'll send out more alerts via Forest Hills Connection and Van Ness Main Street. So that's it for me right now, if anyone has any questions. Thank you.
Has anyone got any questions for Gloria? Thank you, Gloria.
Thank you.
And now we have Mona Lisa Johnson has her hands up.
Good evening. My name is Mona Lisa Johnson, and I'm here to give you just an announcement from Hillwood State Museum and Gardens. As many of you know, in 2020 and 2021, Hillwood State built a beautiful new collections and research center beneath the parking deck, enabling us to expand the library and special collections storage to care for our expanding holdings at Hillwood. The library moved from a smaller building called the Chauffeur's House near the Ellen McNeil Charles Visitor Center. The building was originally constructed in 1955, 1956 as the home for Marjorie Post chauffeur, and was renovated in the early 1980s to house the library. Now, the old library is empty of books, and we're again remodeling it to serve as an office space for the visitor services and communication staff members. There will be a little change in its outside appearance of this building, except for changing the front steps into a ramp to make it handicap accessible, and it will not be a building open to the public. So we just wanted our friends at the ANC to be aware of this small renovation at Hillwood, but it will not impact the public or our neighbors. So we just wanted you to know about it. And of course, come to visit us. The gardens are spectacular. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Mona Lisa. Are there any questions for Mona Lisa? Okay, is there any other community updates? Please raise your hand using a participants list, or just say something. All right, hearing none, we will move on to the informational portion of our meeting. Mr. Christopher Geldart is the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety, and Justice. Hello, Mr. Geldart. Do you have a presentation or anything that do you need to share your screen at all?
Good evening, Madam Chair. I do not have a presentation to share.
All right.
Okay. I'm going to I believe that the ask here was for me to talk about some of the mayor's 23 budget, and particularly those things around public safety. So, in that, Mayor Bowser's recognized that keeping our community safe and combating violent crime requires a fully staffed and resourced Metropolitan Police Department, as well as investments in our violence prevention. With the budget that the mayor has submitted, the mayor will put MPD and the district back on its path to the amount of sworn officers that we need in the city. In addition to investing in and growing and diversifying our police force, the budget continues to invest in a whole of government approach to violence prevention, focused on creating opportunity and bringing our communities together so that we can keep each other safe on our streets, in our schools, in our community programming, and in our justice system. The mayor's FY23 budget proposal builds on the recovery budget we put forward last year and continues to help more Washingtonians build a future in a safer, stronger, healthier, and more equitable DC. We regularly speak to public safety and justice as an ecosystem, and Mayor Bowser has invested in all parts of that ecosystem to bolster and strengthen each part's capacity to better serve our residents. Through historic investments in agency staffing, new infrastructure, and creative programming, Mayor Bowser helps position our agencies to best serve the varied needs of our diverse population while providing tools to empower agencies to make residents be safe and feel safe in their communities. I'm going to cover a few of those areas, highlights on housing, because that's where people start. That's where safety really starts for people. And as many of you probably know, the mayor in her budget for affordable housing for our district residents, another historic $500 million investment in the contribution to the Housing Production Trust Fund. And that includes $41 million for protected sponsored vouchers, as well as our investments in housing, strengthening our schools, $13.5 million for recreation for all. This is increased access to the Department of Parks and Recreation's most sought after programs, services, and facilities for youth across the district. We know that when our youth are not engaged, that gives downtime, and sometimes that downtime can lead to behavior that we don't want to see on the street. So more recreation time, more programming that is most desired is in the budget, so we can do that. The summer youth employment, $6.5 million for the Marion Barry's summer youth employment model to fund and implement the initiative that will allow youth to counter learning loss during the school year. Our Safe Passage program, which is in many of our areas across the city, $5.8 million for Safe Passage programming to engage with community-based organizations that provide a presence and safe passage to students and families as they travel to and from school. This includes an increased investment of $623,000 to expand presence to 7 additional schools in FY23. A couple other things, it includes security improvements for DPR Parks and Recreation, a $1.3 million investment there. Leadership academies in additional schools, $906,000 for our officer neighborhood safety and engagement to support and violence intervention at school level in additional schools. Our afternoon access program, another almost $400,000 to continue investments in additional recreation and academic programming opportunities all over the district, including focus on underserved communities and engagement with children between the ages of 3 and 12. Particularly to our public safety investments, as many of you may have heard, we are investing $251 million in a new treatment and rehabilitation facility. This is to take the jail from where it is now with a central detention facility that's aged beyond its usefulness, and be able for us to move everybody out of that and expand our correctional treatment facility, and be able to have the capital improvement plan to continue to have safe and secure humane conditions as we move folks out of the central detention facility until a new correctional treatment facility annex is completed. That is a big deal, and that is something that folks have asked for many years. It's now in the budget and in the financial plan over the next 5 years. additional $2.3 million for addressing programming for at-risk youth within the Department of Rehabilitation Services, Youth Rehabilitation Services. That's to support violence prevention and diversion among at-risk non-incarcerated youth, including $350,000 for dedicated bilingual credible messengers. We have $11.4 million going into programs for returning citizens. This includes financial assistance through community-based organizations, financial coaching, and peer navigation as we have returning citizens coming back into the community so they're best served. We have $1.7 million. So we'll talk a little bit about expanding our violence interruption programming. We're bringing on high quality care coordinators for $1.7 million. This expands our care coordination and service delivery for at-risk individuals for gun violence. It includes 20 life coaches and 3 supervisory care coordinators. This will enable us to best work with all of those residents in the city who are at the highest risk of being involved in gun violence, whether being a victim or a perpetrator of gun violence. Our violence interruption and credible messengers, another $9.7 million to continue our investment to get additional violence interrupters and credible messengers out on our streets to help work with those at most risk, as well as about $500,000 to help our community-based organizations have better technical assistance in being able to be effective in the granting that we're in the things and the jobs we're asking them to do in the streets of our city. And finally, when it comes to MPD, we've got some additional investments in here, not only the investments in hiring new officers and bringing cadets on board to get an additional 347 officers on in FY23, but also to retain folks that we have in the Metro, the good officers we have in the Metropolitan Police Department. This is a total package that was sent down to the council, the $50 million to bring in the additional 347 officers, as well as $30 million for recruitment and retention incentives to put the district back on its path to 4,000 sworn officers. This focus on recruitment and retention, as many of you may know, though we'll recruit, our goal is to recruit and hire 347 officers in FY23. We're predicted to lose 300 officers through attrition in FY23. So our goal here is to add additional funding so that we can not lose as many of those officers that may choose to go work someplace else. We want to keep them here in the city. We want to keep our good officers that are out there in community. So, if we lose 300 and we only bring in 347, that's only a net gain of 47 officers. So we're trying to make sure that we're not losing as many officers through attrition. And finally, about $500,000 was put in for Leadership Training Academy to enhance opportunities for MPD's ranking members to participate in law enforcement specific training initiatives, as well as $215,000 to educate officers on wellness strategies. As we look at the vast amounts of things we ask our Metropolitan Police Department officers to do, we need to be worrying about their mental wellness and their wellness as well as they're doing this work. So additional funding there to help and assist them with their mental wellness. I'm going to stop there. There's a lot more in the budget. I kind of hit the high points. I want to make sure there's plenty of time for questions, and I'll stick around, Madam Chair, as long as you want me to.
Thank you so much, Mr. Goddard. And, safety and security is a big issue in ANC3F, especially within the last several months, but definitely within the last couple of years. So we normally have our commissioners ask questions, and then we'll have the community ask questions. So I want to start with commissioners first. And you could raise your hand.
Mr. Geldart, hi, thank you for joining the meeting tonight. As Commissioner David mentioned, public safety and crime is top of mind right now. And I'm sure the mayor knows that, right? She is running from incident to incident around the city, unfortunately. My question centers around the bifurcated system of justice that exists in this city as a historical matter of, the separation of jurisdiction between crimes committed by children versus children being arbitrarily in some ways defined as, those who are 17 and under versus 18 and up, which are handled by the U.S. Attorney's Office. What is the mayor's office doing to work with the U.S. Attorney's Office in not just bringing to justice? I realize that that's the Attorney General's role, but addressing the root causes of crime for those committed by adults.
Sure. Okay, so we're going to talk just in the adult arena. We have a very unique relationship in the city, as you know, with our U.S. Attorney. The Chief of Police, myself, on behalf of the mayor, meet with the U.S. Attorney's Office almost every other day. I personally meet with the U.S. Attorney himself every Friday, as does the Chief, in 2 separate meetings. The Chief's goal in his meetings is to make sure that as we're moving cases through and closing cases at the police level, at the Metropolitan Police Department level, that those cases are going to go forward, get papered, and come to a good resolution on our behalf through his efforts. So he's working on where are we with warrants, where are we with, being able to do some probable cause, making sure if we do probable cause, we're doing it well enough that we can ensure that those cases will get papered and followed through. Myself, I'm meeting with the U.S. Attorney on multiple different levels. Some of them, the fact that, our court system, quite frankly, that justice system has been shut down for COVID for a very long time. The courts themselves didn't really open up to start really moving cases through until March of this year. A lot of it was virtual. They will say that they were handling cases. I won't deny that. We were able at the jail to bring in enough equipment and try to accommodate as best we could the ability for them to do virtual hearings, virtual trials, and all of that, but that only goes so far. I can tell you right now from my perspective, and these are things I talked to the U.S. Attorney about, I have about 700 people in our jail right now. By the way, the population of the jail is only 1,300. 700 of those people are on pretrial felony holds. Those are people who have not had their trials yet, and they're averaging over 300 days in DC jail. As we talk with the courts and the court systems, we're down 14 judges in both our district and superior court due to appointments not making it through Congress in any kind of timely manner. So that leads to a caseload of about 300 to 400 cases per judge in the district right now. So those are the kind of conversations that I'm having with them to make sure that we're not losing anything in that process and just trying to push cases through in some kind of settlements or, things that are not what we need to be seeing for our criminal justice system in the District of Columbia. So those are a couple of the different ways that we're working with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the courts as well. I'm not sure if that fully answered your question. I'll be glad to answer more if you want to go in a different direction.
No, that's helpful. I guess and that is helpful. I didn't understand that there was such a backlog of cases due to COVID and unfortunately people waiting to.
By the way, I only mentioned the 700 felony pretrial that we're holding inside DC jail. I didn't mention the thousands that are out in community that are not being held, right, that are under pretrial supervision, that are out in the street. Some may be ankle monitors, some may just be, it all depends on the charge and the type. So there are a lot of people waiting trial at this point.
Mm-hmm. So I appreciate that, and that's very helpful. And to get at I think that one thing that I'm hearing from folks in various neighborhoods, not just in ANC3F, but lots of ANCs and just friends, frankly, who live in all various parts of the city, is that there is concern that the mayor's office is working as a silo relative to the AG's office, relative to the council, and relative to the various programs and agencies. I heard this when I watched the Judiciary Oversight Committee hearings not that long ago that Charles Allen presided over, that they're working in silos. Can you speak to what the mayor's office is doing to collaborate with the Attorney General's office and with the programs like Cure the Streets,
Sure,
the ACE program, all those kind of things.
Sure. So the ACE and the PASS program are both ours. That's in the executive. That falls under the
Right.
Department of
Right.
Services. The program for Cure the Streets. Let me back up for a second. I mentioned in the beginning as I was doing the general talk through, the way we look at public safety, it's an ecosystem. The whole thing is an ecosystem. And in that ecosystem, you start off with prevention. That's our violence interruption. That's our credible messengers, people like that out in the street. You know, and let me just say this, the violence interrupters, that includes the ones that are in our ones office, as well as Cure the Streets. It includes our credible messengers out of DYRS that are working with youth. And it includes our roving leaders out of the Department of Parks and Recreation that are also working with our youth and some adults. So those are all our credible contact people, those that are working with folks on the prevention side that are out in the street trying to help people find a better path than a path of any kind of violent crime. So we work with all of them. We hold calls with all of them. Right now, we're working on what we found to be about 200 of the most vulnerable folks. We've done a study with the National Institutes of Justice reform that say who are most at risk in the city. There's about 200, 250 in that neighborhood names on that list right now. We've broken that out to all the credible contacts that I just mentioned. All those credible contacts have a pathfinder, somebody who can help them get city services to ensure that we're coordinating and collaborating across the board in the city. And that includes the ACE and PASS, as you mentioned, as well as housing, vital records, job training, job opportunities, all of that kind of stuff. We work that in coordination with the federal government, not just the U.S. Attorney and the Attorney General, but with our supervisory agencies as well. CSOSA that oversees parole and probation, as well as all of the alternative programs the AG's office has as well, Attorney General's office has as well. Then the prevention side, that's a lot of interplay right there across the board. You go to the next step, and you're getting into now the intervention side, and this is where law enforcement starts to come in on the intervention side. As we work in that intervention side, we're working with all of our federal partners in there, DEA, U.S. Attorney's Office, the ATF, the FBI. The chief actually has all of these agencies sitting together with the Metropolitan Police Department, looking across the city at where we see our violent crimes happening, some of our robberies and things like that, to ensure we have all the resources we need and the collaboration we need across the board with the AG, the U.S. Attorney, and all of the federal agencies that can bring resources to bear on the issues that we're seeing in areas across the city. That's in the intervention side. And then we move into the criminal justice side. Now we've made arrests and we're moving into the court systems and the things like that. We've collaborated with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the courts to give them as much as we could to have them operate. Matter of fact, we helped the U.S. Attorney's Office set up full trial spaces that were appropriately spaced, plexiglass, all the things you would need in a building to do a grand jury so that you can have a trial in a COVID environment. So we've worked very closely with them to do that. Matter of fact, brought the resources to them to do that on our ask. And then you move into, after the judicial side, you move into, what we're talking about as far as how do we help folks that are now in the incarcerated side, those that are going through the rehabilitation piece of the ecosystem. In that, again, we set up all of our virtual trials. We set up spaces within the jail so that even during COVID, we could have attorneys come in there. They can do all sorts of pre-trial things they needed to do, as well as trial things, hearings and things like that they needed to do, as well as maintaining that a good, safe environment for people at our jail through COVID, and working with the U.S. Marshal's Office, as many of you may see, to ensure that our facilities are where they need to be. And we're being transparent with that. And that's that ecosystem piece. So I know I went very long there, and I apologize, Commissioner, but I wanted to make sure I answer that in the right way as we look at it in ecosystem and everywhere where we're working with those entities.
How can ANC3F work more closely with your office to address the issues, the safety issues in our neighborhood?
So I'm trying to think if I've been with ANC3F in this role yet, and I don't think so. But I have been with many other ANC commissioners in areas throughout the city. I'm not some of you may know me from my time when I was running the coronavirus response, or when I was doing when I was running public works for the city. I don't like to sit in an office. Matter of fact, my chair, I don't think even has dimples in it for me sitting in it in my office, because I'm out. And we need to be out there. And that's kind of setting that tone for the rest of the agencies, that we don't sit back inside our agencies. We're out in the city, because that's where our job is. So I'm out there. I believe, I don't know if it's 3F, but I know I'm doing a walk next week in Ward 3, particularly on, I believe I'm up by Howard and that whole corridor right there. I'm sorry, not Howard, up by UDC and that whole corridor right there next week. So, but aside from that, anything that the ANC needs, I am 100% accessible. Matter of fact, before I get off here, I'll put my cell phone number in the chat, and any one of you can, and if you don't already have it from Public Works, because I also gave that to all the ANC commissioners, then you have my cell phone number. If there's anything that you need, please call.
Okay, thanks. We have a question from Commissioner Tenderick, and then we'll go to the community for any questions.
All righty. Hello. I have 2 questions, maybe 3 if we have enough time. I'll start with a very quick one. If people want to testify about the mayor's budgets, I know there are DC Council hearings happening right now. How and when are we able to do that?
So most of the agency budget hearings are over. Matter of fact, all the agency budget hearings are over, as far as I know. I know all my agency ones are over. So the 12 agencies underneath public safety are all done. There are, I believe the council is working on their markups right now. I believe they have hearings, committee hearings and hearings of the whole to go through their parts of the budget. And I'm not sure beyond that, but I can make sure that I have our legislative folks reach out to the ANC and get those to you.
Awesome. My next question is,
always call them. Call the council members. I'm sure they will pick up an ANC commissioner's call, just like I will.
Love it. No, just to check in and see if you know, or you'd be able to help out along with that. So especially with safety concerns. My next question, you mentioned briefly about the idea of like community associations, and there seems to be a very small amount of $500,000. I'm curious as to what are the associations. I'm curious as to why is it that it just like it seems to be such like a small amount. And I know people talk about being proactive with their safety. That's something that we as the ANC are trying to be just more proactive about, and just working with these associations that can be really helpful in regards to safety. So I'm curious as to what are these groups and why does it seem such like a small number?
Sure. So let me be a little bit more clear. The number that you mentioned that I talked about, which was the $500,000 for technical assistance grants to community-based organizations, that's to help them build capacity. That's all that is. This technical assistance from some of our government organizations to help them build their capacity to be able to handle the amount of work and the type of reporting and things like that that we have for community-based organizations. That's not all the money they get. All of the work we just talked about so Cure the Streets is a community-based organization. All the Attorney General, I think it's about $7 million a year that they put into that. That is money that goes to a community-based organization. Our $9.7 million in the FY23 budget for our violence interrupters and credible messengers, those are all community-based organizations. There's a lot of money. This is why we needed to do this capacity building, because there's probably about $40 million just in public safety alone that will move out to community-based organizations to do the work in the street that will be overseen by the agencies. So we wanted to make sure we also put something out there for those smaller upcoming community-based organizations to build capacity to better help the city in the communities, because these are folks that live in the community, that have their business in the community, that are helping all around our violence interruption spaces, incredible messaging spaces. So we want to make sure we added a little bit extra funding in there for them to build capacity. Did that help?
So yeah. So you're saying about 40 million is input in total for these community organizations, correct?
In the in the violence prevention space of the ecosystem.
Okay,
It's
and
about
how does that compare to like with like MPD's budget? Like, is there like a more bigger increase for MPD, or is it sort of equal? I'm curious as to how's that 40
Sure.
million for the organization compared to like the MPD's budget? Because I mentioned the idea of gaining 400 cops. So I'm curious as to how much would that money be and that sort of
Sure.
stuff.
So the increase to the MPD budget this year, if I remember correctly, is probably somewhere around an $80 million increase. But let me back up for a second. When I said $41 million, that's just for the community-based organizations. That doesn't include all the upstaffing and everything else we're doing for the agencies that do violence prevention. For example, the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement went from, they received about a 32% increase in their budget this year. So when you add the budget for the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, the Department of Youth Rehabilitative Services, you add our Mayor's Office of Returning Citizens, all of the folks that are really working in the prevention space here, when you add all of their budgets up, it's pretty darn close to what you get for a total for the Metropolitan Police Department budget, not just the increase, but the total.
Thank you, Mr. Geldar.
Can I add? I'm sorry, Mr. Geldar. So this budget stuff is interesting because it helps us understand that there's a commitment and there are resources dedicated. But I would really be grateful for some advice on how commissioners are supposed to respond to constituents when we wake up to a text message, to an email or a text message from a neighbor who says, you know, their car was rifled through last night. And that, by the way, is the least of it, right? Yeah. The next level is my husband was held at gunpoint and robbed last night. So the answer can't be, oh, don't worry, the mayor's got a lot of money in the budget for this, right? So what are we supposed to say when constituents come to us? Because we're in a really, really tough position, to be honest with you. We don't have any enforcement power. We don't have legislative power, and we don't have judicial power. So what is the front line of ANC commissioners who gets these questions on a weekly, if not every other day basis? Not questions, cries for help, concerns, and frustrations.
Sure. You know, there's a couple of things that for you in your toolbox that I know that the ANCs have to help answer that. None of them are going to fully comfort, I'm trying to look for the right word here, will fully address the concern as you receive it. If somebody has gone through a trauma like that, even saying, look, we've got the Metropolitan Police Department showed up in, 4 minutes to the call, they were there, they took the report, they went and looked for cameras on the street to see, get evidence and see if they can find the people that did this. None of that is going to replace the trauma of people calling you all and what you all have to do then in receiving that and giving answers back. So I just want to start with that. So you understand that I'm not trying to say there's some panacea here for this. Okay. However, for your ANC meetings that you all have, do you not have a captain or a lieutenant from 3D that comes on here and talks about the crime with you all? You have connectivity to your 3rd district lieutenants and captains that are for your area?
We have terrific connectivity, and they have been immensely helpful. The reality is, by the time they're brought into a situation, the situation has already occurred, right?
Sure.
And so that addresses, and frankly, they're put in really difficult situations that they're not trained or equipped necessarily to handle by no fault of their own, because there are a whole host of other issues that are not law enforcement issues per se, that come into, and this goes to your question or your point around the ecosystem. So I go back to the question that I started with, which is, what do we say to concerned citizens about the public safety situation, whether it be on a one-off basis around a crime that just occurred, or whether it be on the broader question of what's my ANC doing about this? What are you people doing? Why do you have meetings? What do you get? What progress are you making?
Sure. And honestly, just to give a dead honest answer here to this, we spent 2 years with no hiring. in the Metropolitan Police Department. We were not given the authority to hire through council for 2 years for the Metropolitan Police Department. That made our police department atrophy to where it was below 35, 20-year low in officers on the street. When you don't have officers on the street, you don't have officers on the street. People don't feel safe. They're not there. They're not in the middle of being able to interrupt and intervene when situations like that happen. Okay, so this year, the mayor came out, talked, the chief said, this is what we need to get the officers back on the street and in community where we need them, so that we're there to do preventative measures in the street as well, and not just be responding to radio calls after things happen. Right, so that's number one. We need to hire the police officers that we need to have in the streets. So we have enough police officers out there to provide safety in our streets. That's number one. Number two, if you look at the laws that have been passed and the way that we do accountability in the city, okay, I am not saying that we can incarcerate our way out of this problem whatsoever. But what I am saying is, if you read any of the books that are out there, the studies that are out there, they'll tell you need to have a good prevention side, but you also need to have accountability. And when we have youth, and I don't know if you all saw these pictures, but we had a 13-year-old youth with 3 other youth do armed carjackings. They get caught, and he has a big smile on his face as he's in handcuffs because he knows tomorrow he'll be right back out in community. We need to address accountability issues as well. There needs to be accountability when people are doing the acts that they're doing in the streets. Now, does that mean we incarcerate everybody? No. But does that mean we need to do things like I was mentioning in our Department of Youth Rehabilitative Services programs, where we need to have interventions for youth? Because it's not just the adults. You asked on the adults, that's the answer I gave before. When we talk about the youth side of this, the youth side of oversight of youth that are arrested prior to trial, that do not get detained with the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services, with the city. If they're not detained, they go underneath Court Social Services Division. That is a federal entity. They have these centers called barge centers across the city, where they'll have the youth come in that are in that role or in that spot of, they're in supervision. During the pandemic, most of that supervision was virtual. Now, how does that work in making sure that the children are doing what they're supposed to do, the parents are doing what they're supposed to do, and we're not going back out there and recommitting crimes? It's not. So these are areas that we really need to work on. And what I would encourage you, another role for the ANC commissioners, as was asked by the last commissioner, how can we testify? You need to pay attention to the things that are coming out of the council. Right now, there's criminal code reform that's going on in the Public Safety and Justice Committee. Inside that criminal code, which, by the way, our criminal code needs to be reformed. It hasn't been reformed since the early 1900s. So the language needs to be updated. However, there are policy things in there as well. One of those policy things that the council is moving forward in is making carjacking no longer its own crime that has a mandatory minimum to it. It's moving it to be a robbery too, which has no minimum sentencing requirement to it. Now, I have just some cognitive dissonance with that right now as your public safety deputy mayor, and saying we have an epidemic right now of carjackings in the city, and you're going to make the punishment for carjackings less. I don't understand that. The accountability will be less. I do not understand how we can do that. I don't understand how they're going to be able to pass that. But it's in there, and it's going to be coming up for vote here right as the budget goes through. So those are the kind of things that I would encourage and implore, actually, you all to pay attention to. Hey, hold us accountable. By all means, hold me accountable. Okay, this is my job in this city, is public safety, and believe me, it's not an easy job right now, right? But I implore you to hold the rest of that ecosystem just as accountable.
So we have Commissioner.
Can I just,
and then,
can I just, so I'm Lindsay Appiah, I'm the Chief of Staff for the Deputy Mayor. So just a couple of practical things to kind of piggyback on what the Deputy Mayor is saying. I was 9 years at DRS and now I'm Chief of Staff here. And so I know that sometimes, like, I tend to be a very practical person, and in our office, I get all of the constituent, like, really interactions, right? Like, so many of our residents reach out to the mayor or otherwise about what's happening in the city. And one of the things that we talk about is being safe and feeling safe. And what does it look like for us to work together, right? Like as a government, as ANCs, as residents, to both make sure that our communities are safe and that people feel safe, because some of the what's going on is that those are two very different things. That we can, you know, these are complex issues, but root causes and exacerbating issues and all that the pandemic has wrought that is causing our city and cities across the country to experience these spikes in violent crime. But we can, you know, like we're working to address all those issues, but as ANC is like, I think I want to give you the tools, the same sort of things that I say to our residents. Number one, like, as the deputy mayor said, like it is important for us to ensure that you have good connectivity with the Metropolitan Police Department, but they're law enforcement and they have a specific role, and we all play a role in our ecosystem. Some of it is being armed with information, and you know, I put my information in the chat, and I'm happy to work with you all specifically as ANC so that you have. We talked about this in Ward 4 and other places, that you have actual, like, you know, we have really good victim services things, but you wouldn't necessarily know it, because unless you know what's available, you don't know, hey, for anyone who's been a victim of any sort of crime in the district, it's traumatic, and we want to make sure that they're taken care of first and foremost. And so the DC Victims Hotline is a one-stop shop where we have mental health services, where it helps navigate the legal system, and that's run through our Office of Victim Services and Justice Grants, right? Very simple. Someone can call or text or any of that and get all sorts of information. And that's something that I know from ANC's people don't know. Our camera rebate program, right? Because as we, you know, we want to be right, like proactive in trying to bring accountability or otherwise. But we have a camera rebate program where if people put cameras out, we will provide a rebate back to people. These are practical tools that we want to make sure that you have. Like there's the overarching of understanding what our plan is as a city to address this. And you know, we're happy to like have a whole discussion about that, because we have one. And I know sometimes it feels like we don't. And that's our fault for not being good communicators. I say, you know, I'll just be honest about what we're actually doing. And so we have plans for all these things, for juvenile crime, for the carjacking issues, for how you address a multiplicity of that. But I would say this, that in this particular unique cultural moment we find ourselves in, that we're all coming off a pandemic, which brought a lot of darkness, honestly. It's been an extremely heavy time. And we often hear we have a crisis of hopelessness, which is almost as bad as any. That how you partner with us is the things that you're doing now, and that we really are looking to try and be a little more simple and practical in rebuilding neighboring, in reestablishing. There's all sorts of studies on crime or otherwise that communities that are greater, have greater connectivity or social cohesion and collective efficacy deter some of the opportunity crime you're seeing. And because of the pandemic, our relationships as just humans eroded. And so all of our neighborhoods where you wouldn't see a lot of some of the types of crimes that you're seeing right now, because there was strong sort of social bonds, we all became a potential risk to each other. If you breathe on me, you could kill me. And what we need to do is some of the simple things to reestablish neighboring. And so we're looking to invest in positivity campaign and in getting back out and walking, in resourcing the things that are positive in your communities, in community cleanup days, in, you know, music again, and arts and culture, and all the things that make communities strong, that seem simple, but that do deter and help to reestablish some of the appropriate, honestly, social bonds that repel crime. And so this is a partnership. And, you know, none of us had a category for pandemic and then what you do in such major social upheaval. But I want you to know, like, we have a plan for addressing the violent crime, but how we work together as ANCs and otherwise is that we make sure that you're resourced with and you're aware of, in a very simple way, of like, these are all the resources available to your residents. And then also you have a direct line to us, because we are accountable to you all as our residents. And so knowing that you can call on us and be, this thing happened, you know, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that your residents have what they need and that we have appropriate accountability and that we're connected with MPD well, and then that we're resourcing the things that you all know your communities need to reestablish some of that communal strength. It's a work in progress, and this is a relationship and hopefully like the start of relationship building. But I throw all that out there because I know you want like practical tools in hand, and we want to make sure you have those specifically for 3F, you know.
Thank you,
so
Liz.
much, Lindsay. And we are working with MPD. We have a community event Saturday, and then Tuesday we have a crime prevention training. So we're working our way through, and you're on tonight, educating us and keeping us informed. So thank you so much. So we have 3 questions. If I can have each person ask their question, and then I'll have Lindsay or Chris to answer those 3 questions. So then we'll move on from there. Thank you. So Commissioner Appa, Kim, and then Monica, if you can just ask your questions, and then Chris and Lindsay will answer.
This is Commissioner Appa. I think I want to pass on my question to allow a community member the opportunity to speak. So I think a lot of things that Ms. Apia and Mr. Gerhardt said are definitely appropriate. We'd love to continue to partner with you. As we have mentioned, I just want to say a few quick words just to the community in general. A couple things that we are working on, as Commissioner David mentioned, we are working on community events to build more cohesion in our community. You know, we're working with Kathy, who is doing flower planting in the neighborhood to beautify our neighborhood, right? We are working with even, again, DC Water to make sure that like safety comes in all sorts of forms, right? DC Water to make sure that the water is clean. You know, we are really, one of the things we're working on in the background as an ANC is to potentially put together a short-term task force to be able to potentially address some of these issues and hear more feedback from the community around what it is that we really want to see. But with that being said, we want to make sure we are doing things that are addressing specific issues. As Ms. Apia said, there's a feeling of safety, and then there's like actual crime that's happening in our neighborhood. And we want to make sure that we are addressing both of those things. So in addition, we have many community committees that desperately need additional voices from the communities. And those are also other ways for you to continue to interact with your community and build a positive, continue to build positivity in our community and spread that. So those are things that we are, as a ANC Commission, are continue to encourage and that we are working on through the end of the year. We know some of the things that the community has raised to us are not moving fast enough, especially if those things are happening to you. And, you know, obviously all the commissioners here live in this neighborhood as well. So everything that happens in this neighborhood also impacts us. So we'll continue to, we appreciate all of the feedback and the pressure that the community's put on us to try to address these issues. And we'll continue to work with the communities to try to do our best. So I really appreciate the comments that you guys made today. And with that, I'll pass it to Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I just want to say up front that after a year and a half of pushing this issue in this neighborhood, I'm really relieved and pleased that Commissioner Mita and David and Appa have listened and, you know, set the situation and set the agenda. Like I said, I've been working on this issue for a long time, and I don't think the mayor's office has listened to us. We've asked a lot of questions. I'm not sure if you're aware, but we had the #1 spike in violent crime across the city, comparing 3 and 4 years and the 3 and 4 years prior. It's a small number in terms of the amount of crime, but no one's given us the answer why. We think we know why. To me, it looks political. Because the truth, the real truth behind it isn't really being answered. And that makes me think, well, why? Why would someone keep that information? And I think the ultimate losers are the community and the people who are being assisted or not assisted in our neighborhood. I think a lot of people were dumped here. Obviously that makes people desperate. They weren't given furniture. And these issues were brought to the attention over and over again and weren't addressed. And so oddly enough, my husband is someone who had a gun to his head a month ago. And we don't know if it's related to the community, but these issues kept coming up. And then more people sort of started hanging around the neighborhood. There's drug deals in our back alley. I mean, no one's answer. I mean, we have tried every avenue. I've sent testimony into the council. The council will listen, and I think they know what's going on, but I feel like there's nothing they can do. So, I mean, it's a deeper issue, and I'd like to be able to talk to it and talk to you or your deputy or chief of staff on the issue, because I think it's a real problem, and it's hurting this area in particular and hurting people who really need help. And
so can I
mean,
say, because you're being
Hold
cryptic
on.
and I'm like a real straightforward person.
Hey, Lindsay, I think we're trying to
Yeah.
get the two questions in. I want to answer as well, but let's see if we're getting the two questions in, and then we'll answer both. I think that's what the chairman wanted to do.
Yes, Monica, if you can ask your question, so then they could, Chris and Lindsay could respond, and then we'll move on from there. Thank you.
Thank you. My question is going to be brief. A year ago, well, I guess almost 2 years ago, but there was a DC Police Reform Commission that was formed, and a year ago, April 2020 to 2021, they delivered their final report. And as far as I could tell, that report's been sitting on a virtual shelf gathering dust. Are the recommendations of that report any part of that report being implemented? Is anyone looking at that? Is anything being done with that in the mayor's office? Because it really seems like nothing's been happening. Thanks.
Thank you.
Community questions?
I'm sorry? There's one more question? Okay, Chris and Lindsay, you're on.
Okay. And if the gentleman who just jumped in wants to ask, be glad to, again, stick around as long as you guys want on your agenda. It's your agenda, so I'll be glad to stick around for that. So going back to the first question, I'm trying to sift through it wasn't a direct ask, I think, in there, but I think the question gets to that there are people being moved into the community from other parts of the city, and that's causing a problem, and there's something being hidden about those folks. And I'll be direct.
It's not hidden about the folks. It's just the fact that the mayor won't explain to PSA 203. And by the way, Commander Bedlian and all of his officers have been phenomenal and interact really well with individuals in the neighborhood. I just want to know why no one's looking into the cause. To me, I think a lot of it has to do with greed, different landlords garnering more than market value, not paying attention to their tenants, no one taking responsibility because they're almost incentivized not to with the amount of money they're getting paid. And because it is the city created a gold mine with the amount that is allowed in the neighborhood, but not every unit is $4,500, and they don't care. They just want the checks, and then they leave people there, and then there's no follow through.
Got it. Okay, yeah, and so to get to now fully understand exactly, it is actually what I was talking about as well. Yes, and I mentioned in the very beginning about the Housing Trust Fund and the amount of money that are going into voucher housing and things like that. Just in the last 2 months, I've been to over 20 different properties in the city across multiple wards where we do have issue properties because of the voucher process and everything that we've had. Not to blame everything on the coronavirus. I'm not doing that. So let me just say this though. We talked about the community-based organizations, the agencies that do voucher housing, that bring the folks that are eligible for a voucher and then connect them with a housing provider in that process. They also borne the responsibility of ensuring that they're following up with those clients that are going into those housings to ensure that they're getting the services from the city so that we know what's going on by that housing and we know when we start to have issues. I say all that to say that ain't working. And I'm going to tell you that right now. And I'm not going to argue with you one bit about it because like I said, 20 different buildings I've been to, and I can tell you that that's not working. And I can tell you that we're bringing every single agency that can give a voucher out into the room to go through the process of how we are accounting for what's happening as we put people into voucher housing. Now, one thing I will say, you know, they are allowed to do above market share, above market rent with the vouchers. That's changing. We have a new director that is over at the DC Office of Housing, the Housing Authority, and they're looking at how much are they actually going to be allowed to go to market or above market for certain areas. They're looking at that whole process of how do we readjust that. Now, also talking to some of the more responsible owners of facility of the buildings and apartments and things like that. Those that really do care, those that are out there putting up cameras, cleaning up their properties, trying to have the right things happen there, but still have issues with some of the folks that they have inside their facilities. They're having issues as well with how do I keep my building where I need it to be. So I'm half market, half not market. My market people are saying they don't want to be here because we're having issues with this.
They're not taking the market people anymore, by the way.
No, but they actually are. I've been to 20
okay.
of them over the last 2 months. I can tell you across the whole city. Not every housing provider is that responsible. And that's why I'm going to these houses to see who is.
And we need a solution for condos, by the way.
So I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question. Was there a question?
We need a solution for condos because there's no way to control it. I mean, we've talked to the AG's
Exactly.
office and they're like, eh.
So exactly. Okay, getting something a nuisance property doesn't do anything. Okay, I'm being real. I'm being honest here. It really doesn't.
I get it.
So we need to change the process because I can tell you there's housing not in ANC3 or 3F, but there is what we basically de facto created as a public housing unit because it became all voucher holders. And I look at this from a public safety perspective. I get it on the downstream end of everything. And we're running 120 calls for service over 2 months to this one building. Okay, that's a problem. So I hear what you're saying, and we're not hiding anything. We need to fix the problem. And the problem starts with, one, what are we paying in our vouchers? Does that include everything we need to do for security in those facilities for those people, as well as the treatment that needs to be done for those folks that are coming in there to ensure that we are following up with them on a bi-weekly to monthly basis. We know exactly what's happening inside that facility. DC government knows and is sharing that information from the Department of Human Services, from the Department of Behavioral Health, from Veterans Affairs, from all of the folks that have the ability to do vouchering in the city. We're sharing that information as well with the public safety entities so that we're not on the back end where you have all of the drug kids pull up from the 1st of the month to the 5th of the month and they're running in and out of the buildings. And in the 5th of the month, there's no more money left in there, so they leave. And then you can watch them again, the camera come back the next 1st of the month. Okay, and I'm running MPD units over there to break that up. And, you know, it's a cycle that should have been stopped before that gets to there. So do I have the solution today? No. Have we diagnosed the problem? I believe so. And that's what we're going to be working on. Now, that's not a budgetary thing per se. We need to get in here and understand that government is working the right way with the AG's office, with the U.S. Attorney's office, and all of our DC agencies communicating effectively on what's happening inside the buildings where we're doing voucher housing.
Thank you.
Well,
Mr.
I mean,
Bogart.
no one has, I was just going to say, no one, I mean, until now, it's been hidden information. So I really appreciate your frankness. So thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
All right, and then that one question on the report monitoring commission, and then we have to move on and just,
Sure.
you have your phone number, we'll follow up with that and maybe have you at the next meeting, but we'll have to move on from there.
Sure. As far as the police commission, the Police Reform Commission, which was brought to bear by the council to do a report on what the Police Reform Commission would see as could be changes to how we do policing in the city. So several things. I read the entire report. I read it probably 17 times. I met with the chairs I don't know when the report, when they were finishing it up, and since it came out, I probably met with the chairs at least a dozen times. Robert Bob, who was one of the chairs, is actually a very, I consider him one of my mentors in the city, former city administrator. So I'm very familiar with the report and know all the aspects of it. There were several things in there we agreed with and we've actually implemented. We have some alternatives to police that we put into our 911 system, where when we get a call for service now that can be a mental health consumer or provider, we have the process in place now. We're still staffing it on the action end. We have one CRT team fully right now. We need more. There's funding there and they're continuing to hire. But we have a crisis response team from the Department of Behavioral Health that will respond to certain calls all on their own. Some calls with the fire department and police department. And then some calls will just, if they're violent calls, they will go just to the police department with an ability for them to call the CRT if they think they've de-escalated it down to do that. So that there's also when there's some traffic things that we're doing when it comes to accidents that happen in the city, there's a diversion from police reporting to that to DDOT reporting to that. Those were two of the recommendations that were in there. I'm using that as an example. There were some things in there though that we wholeheartedly disagreed with and we're not going to do. Although the council took action on it, we're taking action again this year to try to stop that, which is pulling all of the school resource officers. These are Metropolitan Police Department officers that undergo extensive training, years of training to be police officers inside the schools with our youth in the school community. They're not your beat cops. These are people who are trained to work with youth. They understand the community. They're in that community. They're in that school every day. They're working with the youth in that school. The council decided that they are going to do away with the school resource officers. They reduced the number of them this year, and there's a continuing reduction next year and the year after until there are none. If you ask any school administrator, or you ask any of the multitude of the people that work in the schools or that have children in the schools, they'll tell you they do not want the school resource officers to be removed. Because now if you have to call a police officer to the school, they're not going to be trained. They're not going to know the school. They're not going to know how to work with the youth. They're not going to know how to do the youth de-escalation as well as a trained and resource school resource officer. So look, that's just an example of another one of the things that the council took action on that we disagreed with and we continue to disagree with, because the best way we can serve safety in our schools is to have people trained on how to do that appropriately in the schools. So just a couple things.
Can I say something really quick?
Thank
I'm really
so much. Sorry. We can go another hour on this and we're keeping the conversation going. Mr. Goddard, if you can stick around and pay attention to the chat, because there's more questions that's going to be coming to you in the chat, but we'll definitely keep the conversation going.
I offer to come back anytime you want me to come back.
Yes, please.
Okay.
So I wanted to move on to, so next on our agenda is a DC Water update. But just before we get to DC Water, we have an update from Paul Harrison just on our streets and sidewalks update.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. And I know we're running late, so I'll keep this very brief. But Streets and Sidewalks met last week. We had a really productive conversation. Three things on the agenda. So the first is the continuing development of the Connecticut Avenue reversible lanes and bike lane study. We know the reversible lanes are gone, but now we're figuring out what the bike lane is going to look like and streetscape and other issues. So Bob, our chair, was there, as well as Commissioner Crystal. So there's a continuing community engagement process there. If folks want in or have thoughts on that, I'd suggest you reach out to either Bob or David on that, or myself. I can help with that. The second is one of our members, actually two with Kathy, raised the issue, as folks may be aware, DC has recently entered into a contract with a firm to upgrade all of the city's streetlights into high efficiency LEDs. So that's kind of modernizing that system. That contract has been awarded, but one of the benefits of it is it allows much more specialized sort of adaptive management of the system. There's a lot of tools there. So we have prepared a resolution that we'd like the whole commission to take a look at, asking DDOT to start figuring out a system for using that. There are some places where the lights don't need to be as bright. There are some places where color change, which has an impact on human health, but also the environment, should be considered. There may be new lights that go up. There's a series of things here. So we want to just kind of raise that. I know normally the commission will put an agenda, a proposed resolution up for consideration, and we talk about it next time. So we'd like to move that to the full commission at this point. And lastly, as part of this is sort of raised by the Soapstone DC Water DDOT project, there are going to be some changes at the intersection of 32nd and Albemarle, which is the closest entrance to Soapstone Trail to Connecticut Avenue. We have prepared a survey that we're going to share with the community through as many channels as possible to ask people about their opinions as to whether that intersection should have some safety and amenity improvements as part of this. So we know DC Water and DDOT are already going to be tearing up that intersection to do some improvements. So it's a great opportunity. For example, a lot of people walk there. There's no crosswalk or traffic control devices there. So we had a couple different choices. We want to get people's feedback on that. So hopefully people will keep an eye out for that survey and fill it out so we can bring that back with some suggestions for DC Water and DDOT about how they might improve that intersection as part of this project. So that's a report from Streets and Sidewalks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mr. Harrison. And as I remind everyone in the community to get updates on what all our committees are doing, just visit our website at ANC3F.com. We'll now be moving on to DC Water has an update for us. Mr. Emmanuel Briggs available?
I'm actually going to jump in for Emmanuel right here from the start. While Barack is pulling up our slides, thank you, Chair David, and good evening, everyone. We're happy to be in front of you to talk about this issue tonight. Thank you for giving us time on a packed agenda. We know you have a lot of important things to discuss, and we know that you and your constituents have concerns about the project and want to hear how we plan to address those concerns. Specifically, Commissioner Mehta a little bit ago sent us an email the other day asking how air quality would be monitored in addition to the steps that we are taking to prevent any air pollution. Commissioner Mehta also asked us about schedule, arrival of heavy equipment, tree cutting, etc. But I will add the text, Commissioner Mehta, in bold in your email was concerning the air monitoring. So with that, I'll jump to the slides. Barack, if you can jump to that outline slide. Thank you very much. I'm going to share just a couple of very brief statement about where we are right now, and then we'll get to the main point, which is those CIPP air emissions. Then we'll talk about the CIPP construction approach and how that interacts with the air emissions that we're looking at. The air quality monitoring plan, we'll spend a little bit on that, as well as the construction plan. And then we'll give you a little bit of a schedule update and jump to next steps. So still on the previous slide, Brock, we do have a few subject matter experts queued up to speak with you tonight. One of the benefits we have at DC Water is our tremendous access to national experts on really everything. So we brought in Melissa McLaughlin. She manages AECOM's air measurement group. AECOM is one of the consultants that does a lot of work for us at DC Water. And she is AECOM's national technical lead for ambient air monitoring. Her expertise includes ambient air quality networks, risk assessment, quality control, and much more. She's been responsible for multiple national air monitoring programs, not just for wastewater utilities like DC Water, but a whole range of clients that have air emissions. She and her team have developed a plan for us that puts us at the leading edge of air monitoring for CIPP. After Melissa, Eric Lienhard, who you all have seen a number of times over the last 10 years, will share a little bit of information. He doesn't really need an introduction since he's been in front of you so many times. And then Eric will hand it back to Melissa to talk a little bit more about the air monitoring plan. And then Kevin Schnabel with IPR, that's our construction company. He will share a little bit of information about the schedule. He has more than a decade of experience building projects just like this one. In his role as Director of Project Management, he builds pipeline projects from Virginia all the way up to Maine. So now on the next slide, where are we now? I think we have kind of a common ground and common understanding that this project will provide multiple benefits to the community and environment, whether it's water quality, trails, trees, etc. And DC Water has switched our water curing process, it has switched to a water curing process, and we've switched our resin to a non-VOC, a styrene-free resin. We've also committed to and are currently in the initial contracting talks to have a third-party air quality monitoring company do the air quality monitoring for us. We're actively coordinating with DOE. Stephen Hours is on the line, or at least he was a little bit ago. And we've been interacting with him quite a bit as we progress the project along. And then we also know that this project and the air quality monitoring that we're doing will generate data so that DOE can assess requirements for any future CIPP work after Soapstone. Real quick on the next slide, we are using CIPP, which includes insertion, as many of you are aware, insertion of an uncured resin tube into the existing defective pipe. And during that curing process, there is a potential for residual chemical releases, air emissions, odors. So we are here tonight to talk about those CIPP air emissions. On the next slide, I will go ahead and hand it over to Melissa, who is going to share what it is that we're looking at with those air emissions.
Thank you, Will. So as we look at the CIPP activities with respect to airborne emissions, we're going to look at the materials and the processes which have the potential to generate these emissions. So DC Water has selected a VOC resin. However, we do understand the curing agent contains VOCs. When reviewing the safety data sheet for the chemical contents of the curing agent, it was determined that cumene is the predominant chemical that's present, with approximately a 2.5% of the agent being cumene itself. Now, of that 2.5%, approximately 90 to 95% will be consumed during the curing process, and we don't anticipate that to be available for release into the atmosphere during the installation. So it is a pretty small percentage of what could be released during that process. Now, the greatest risk for cumene emissions during the installation is going to be released when the liner transport truck doors are opened in the street area or in the work area, and then later in the installation process at the terminal discharge manhole. So we'll remember those two locations, again, at the truck when the doors are opened, and then at that terminal discharge manhole. So what is cumene? Cumene is also called isopropyl benzene. It's a colorless liquid, which at room temperature, or it's a colorless liquid at room temperature. And at certain thresholds, cumene is considered hazardous as an air pollutant, and it does carry some inhalation risks with it. Now, when cumene is exposed to air, it is known to have a pungent odor associated with it. And it is a very odorous chemical in the sense that its odor threshold is quite low, on the order of 0.008 to 0.132 parts per million. But the health-based compliance numbers for cumene published by OSHA and EPA are at 50 parts per million over an 8-hour duration. So what that means is that cumene can be detected by the human nose well below the values that are determined to be unhealthy by OSHA and EPA. So in order to address the potential for air emissions, we can go to the next slide here. DC Water is planning to implement an emissions management plan. This includes best practices during installation to minimize the impact to all workers, the public, and the environment during the CIPP installation. Air monitoring is going to be conducted during the installation in the areas that have the greatest risk. And again, this is near that truck and is also near the terminal discharge manhole to verify compliance with those OSHA and EPA thresholds in real time as the project is ongoing. The installation includes, the program is going to include both community outreach as well as emergency response plans. And before we get too far into the details about air monitoring, I first want to let Eric speak to you real quick about the CIPP installation process, and I will come back and talk about some of the finer details related to air.
Thanks, Melissa, and thank you for inviting me back. So it was really important for the design team to work with Melissa's team to explain to them exactly how the CIPP process was going to occur, how the insertion manhole and the trucks were going to be parked, how we were going to bypass the flow, and what kind of precautions we were already putting in place to contain both water coming down the sewers, as well as air that may travel up and down the sewers. So we worked with them on creating different scenarios that we have here at Soapstone Park. So this is scenario one, which is a common scenario we would see on Audubon Terrace, where we've got homes directly connected to a sewer before it goes into the interceptor into the park. So on the left, we've got the sewer in Audubon Terrace. We've got the homes connected to them. Those round circles are cleanouts. Those are areas where homeowners and their plumbers or DC water can pig out or clean the line to make sure there's no roots and no debris that's in those on a regular basis. So those come into play because in the air monitoring program, we want to be using those spots to test the air coming out of those cleanouts. So on the right, how will the process occur? The lining will occur in this diagram in the two middle manholes, between the two middle manholes where that truck is. So where the truck's located is an insertion manhole. There will be a plug on the upstream end of that insertion manhole to prevent any water from coming down, as well as any air from that manhole going up. Or from the lining mechanism. Above that manhole, we have another plug that we prevent any flow coming from downstream. We will bypass around that operation. As you can see between the two lines, we have another plug at the downstream end to prevent any water or gases to go down the lateral during the curing process. And any homes that are connected to that segment that we are lining, we'll be putting a plug for the air monitoring just above the clean out, so we can test any of the air coming out of the clean out during that curing process. So this is scenario number one that Melissa was given to develop a air monitoring program around. Before we go to scenario two, if we can go to the next slide, we are always asked, what can we do as homeowners to help in this process? So whether we are doing CIPP or it's just a normal day, you want to make sure that all your P-traps, all your sinks, bathtubs, showers, floor drains have been used recently. Every home has a P-trap at each of these things where water typically is held to prevent sewer gases and odors from entering your home. The most common place where we've seen P-traps dry out are in people's basements if they've got a floor drain, because it's typically not used. You're using your shower daily, your toilets, your sinks, but unless you have a flooded basement or regularly pour down water in those floor drains, they dry out pretty quickly. So good housekeeping, always make sure that your P-traps and floor drains have water in them, or you'll start smelling sewer gases on any day of the year. So scenario two that we gave Melissa is similar to Lenore Lane or Lenore Avenue, I'm sorry, where we've got flow from a community coming to a junction manhole. So on the left, we've got the community flows coming from the three houses from the north to the south and from the south to the north from the homes below to a manhole. There's a connector sewer or trunk sewer that's going into the interceptor into the park. And the idea here is to line that trunk sewer. So this is a common scenario for Lenore, for Van Ness East, for Park, Connecticut. Anytime that you've got a manhole and we are lining the line between the main line and the interceptor. So the setup on the right, what is happening is just like we did in Audubon Terrace, we would have a plug in the interceptor. We would bypass the flow. We would create a wet well there. And then in the lining manhole, which is on the right-hand side, where we got 2 pumps, we would put what's called flow-through plugs in, where we've got a plug that will prevent any water from coming into that manhole that we're lining from, as well as any air being discharged could not go up those lines. So we've got 2 types of bypass pumping situations here. The next slide will explain a little bit more about what those look like. So when a manhole is used as a bypass or as a wet well, we've got a plug on the downstream end. We've got a compressor that inflates that plug to prevent any water from going down, but that plug also prevents any air from the work site coming up the pipe. We allow that manhole to act as a wet well or a water column. And then we have a pump that will suck that water out and discharge it downstream around the work site. In the scenario 2, we have a flow-through plug. This is where we plug the line above the work site. We block the flow from coming down the work site, but that plug has a hole in it that allows us to attach a pipe to it and suck through that plug. It's like a tube, like a straw through that plug with the air around it. And we're able to take that water that's backed up in that pipe and discharge it around. Again, those plugs are used for water barrier as well as an air barrier. Water barrier from our work zone and an air barrier to the community, to the houses, to the apartment complexes. And then our last scenario is more like what we see at Van Ness East or Park, Connecticut, where we've got flow from a private sewer or a private neighborhood coming into a centralized manhole. And we are actually lining, in this scenario, the interceptor in Soapstone Park. So we're passing when we've got a connector sewer coming into the park. So again, we create a wet well with a plug inside the park, bypass around. And any time that we pass a connector sewer that we're lining past, we would then use those flow-through plugs to ensure that no air goes up those lines and that the water that would have been coming down those lines do not enter our work zone and are pumped around. So we'll be taking questions at the end. I'm going to hand it back to Melissa, who's going to use scenario 1 in describing exactly how that air monitoring plan, air quality monitoring plan will be done and how it relates to the other scenarios. Melissa?
Thank you. So as we mentioned before, we've got air quality monitoring that's going to be performed, and this is going to be done during each CIPP installation. And really there are 3 types of monitoring that will be ongoing for each event. So we've got monitoring for the workers. These workers are going to be closest to the work zone. They're going to be closer to the chemicals and essentially have a higher health-based risk. We will use OSHA permissible exposure limits to monitor and to confirm compliance with those standards. The measurements will be performed in the work zone for air quality for this group. And we will develop an actionable threshold that will serve as a warning prior to getting to that OSHA permissible exposure level. We'll do a similar approach with our community members. Certainly the community is going to be further away from these chemicals, so we do anticipate a lower health-based risk, but we are going to apply an EPA acute exposure guidance level, that published value for cumene to evaluate the overall health risk to that group. For this, to confirm compliance here, we are going to perform these measurements at the perimeter of the work zone. So this is going to be at that termination manhole as well as near the truck, areas between the work zone and the residential neighborhoods. Again, we'll develop an actionable threshold, which will serve as a real-time warning to provide advance notice of changing conditions, but really so that we can modify work procedures in the field to address anything that happens in real time. And then we have our environmental release. And this is where we're going to actually quantify emission rates that are leaving the manholes associated with the chemicals that are part of this lining installation. And this is part of the overall potential for permitting in the future. So what does this look like? So here we've got that direct house lateral connection. This is scenario 1 that Eric just spoke about. And here we have got a series of instrumentation we're going to use. So we have a PID that we're going to use for measuring total VOCs in real time. So VOCs include cumene, but they also include a slew of other chemicals that may be produced during the curing process. So cumene may react with other chemicals that are in the sewer, and we may see some other VOCs as well. But that this PID is going to be, it's a great instrument to capture all of those in one measurement. So we'll use those at our high-risk locations. This is again going to be the perimeter of the work zone near the truck, as well as at our downwind manhole locations. And then also we have this PID measurements happening before the plug at the lateral connection near the clean out to determine emissions that are entering that lateral connection. And those are shown sort of between the sewer and the residential homes. We will be pairing this with a whole air sample or an integrated air sample that's going to be collected in a SUMA canister and sent off for subsequent laboratory analysis. This will be basically it's an evacuated canister that air gets pulled into, and this will be sent to a lab to analyze for individual VOCs, including cumene, but it can be up to 100 different speciated VOCs, and that the results that we'll get there. And then those results will be paired with an anemometer, which we're actually going to use to measure flow coming out of that termination manhole, so we can quantify the emission rates at that location. We'll also use the SUMA canister to verify compliance with the cumene standard at the perimeter of the truck location too, because that is a high-risk location. So what's next? We're in the process of finalizing the air quality monitoring plans. These will be submitted to the DOEE. As part of that, DC Water is going to coordinate with the DOEE to determine that actionable threshold. We do anticipate this value to be lower than our OSHA and EPA regulatory standards, and will likely be on some different time interval, maybe a shorter time, so we can use it to manage our activities in real time. We are going to be using a third-party contractor for the to implement the air quality monitoring plan, and that's really so that this person is not subject to any bias for schedule or construction pressures that may exist. And then these results will be reported to the DOEE as well as shared with the community. Lastly, the results of the program will be used to inform future construction approach as well as data gathering efforts. So we really want to make sure that we're making use of our data and that we're using it to manage best practices as we move forward. With that, I'm going to pass it to Kevin to talk about some of the elements of the response plans and schedule.
All right, thank you. The below table shows the construction implementation measures being used to minimize impacts to workers, the community, and the environment. First, a hotline has been provided, which is my number. It can be found on the following 2 slides and also the website. Prior to CAPP, we will be installing a wet well barrier, which Eric has noted. Additionally, we will complete our CAPP prep work off-site at a remote location. During construction, we'll be installing using the water cure method with no VOC styrene-free water. We will complete all work in accordance with permits and approvals. Thank you. Community outreach. We will provide monthly communications and updates to the schedule. At least 7 days prior to CAPP rehab work, homeowners and businesses will receive a door hanger. An example can be seen on the slide. The door hangers include an overview of work to be completed, suggest methods for enhanced ventilation and P-trap maintenance, and remind homeowners and businesses of the project hotline number. We provide on-site representation to respond and discuss concerns with the public, publish results of air quality monitoring, and ensure safety data sheets with complete lists of chemicals information are readily available. And Will, do you want to discuss this, or is it me? Oh, if actionable thresholds are exceeded, immediate actions will be First, assess the situation. Then we will determine next steps and communicate with relevant parties, residents, workers, contractors, DC Water, Safety, DOE. If warranted, contact appropriate authorities, and finally submit air quality monitoring results to DOE. Schedule updates. So the below map shows the project. It starts at Albemarle in Site 1, works through the park, and ends with Site 6 near Broad Branch. The next slide will show the anticipated schedule. Please go back for a second. So if you want to know when we will be in your area, please pay attention to where your area might be. So let's give them a second to kind of see where everything is. All right, next slide, please. At this time, all tree removal for the season has been completed. The work will begin on Site 6 and continue in reverse, ending with Site 1 in Albemarle. Work will start with setting up bypass, followed by CTV, then manufacturing the liners. CFPP will follow with the anticipated start date in late June. Following CFPP, we'll complete manhole rehab, asset protection, and restoration.
So I'm going to jump back in here on next steps. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Melissa and Eric as well. Moving forward, what our next steps as it relates to air are we're going to submit an air quality monitoring plan to DOE. We're going to also coordinate with DOE to determine an actionable threshold that is below the OSHA and the EPA regulatory threshold that allows us to take steps to make sure we do not exceed those the regulatory limits. We will be finalizing our detailed SOP for our emergency response plan. There are a lot of different hypotheticals that go into that and variables, I should say, we're going to finalize over the next days and weeks. We are going to execute our contract with the Water Research Foundation to obtain third-party air quality monitoring. And then lastly, not necessarily specific to air quality, but in general, we are committed to continued communication with the ANC and the community members as often as you want us to come back and share updates and to make sure that we have updates coming to you in a variety of modes, whether it's in person, at separate meetings, at these commission meetings, newsletters, emails, etc. We're committed to that frequent and the frequency of communication that you all are looking for. And then on the next slide, we're going to go to questions. So Chair David, I'll turn it back to you. And I assume that you and your fellow commissioners have questions in your constituents as well. And we will endeavor to answer those.
Thank you so much, DC Water team. Commissioners, is Commissioner Mehta around?
I'm gonna cede time to community members on this. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Elledge and colleagues, Ms. McLaughlin, Mr. Schnabel. That was extremely helpful. I think you've answered so many questions that were on my mind and the minds of others. Thank you. I won't go on so others can speak, please.
All right. Anyone from the community? I have Jill who says, what date does CIPP begin?
Barack, can you go back one slide? It is June 15th for that first area down at, well, it's the middle of June. What we really should say is Site 6. And on this legend, you can see the dark blue is the areas of CIPP. So that Site 6 is there in the second half of June. And then for Site 5, it's kind of the second half of July and bleeding a little bit into August there. And you can see, depending on which site we're working at or which of the branch sewers we're working on, it's that dark blue area that progresses over the course of the project duration.
Are there any more questions from the community? Any questions from the commissioners? Any questions from the commissioners? Any questions from the community? This was a very detailed presentation. This was great. I understood everything. Thank you so much. If you can leave your information in the chat in case anyone has any other questions. And we'll move on to the next item on our agenda. Thank you so much, DC Water Team.
Thank you very much. And we'll make sure you get a copy of these slides so that you can have them for future reference.
Yep, and we'll have them on our website as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, and now moving on to the agenda, we have a resolution supporting increased funding to the University of the District of Columbia. I will share my screen really quickly. All right, everyone can see my screen. Commissioner Tenderick.
Yeah, of course. So, hey, everyone. I will say if anyone from UDC is on, that might be helpful just to give some more clarifying language. But UDC reached out to us last month regarding a resolution for support with some of the budgeting that's happening with UDC's budgets this year. And so me and Commissioner Appo drafted a resolution in regards of it. You can sort of read it on there. I'll give a little more context where there's a couple of things, but they mainly want to help with sort of the renovation and operating costs for one of their buildings. It's the 4250 Connecticut building. It's like on the 4th whereas. And so they want to get some more support from the budgets, from the mayor's budget in FY24. So that way they can expedite the renovation and funding for it. And so I'm trying to think anything else on here. Yeah, the main thing is just on the 4250 Connecticut building. That's where that's where they're mostly asking for, along with sort of other staffing and operating costs that they're sort of concerned about. And that's been a resolution right there. It's pretty much in verbatim. I worked with Juanita Gray and also Christina, who is she's the public affairs officer for UDC now. And so I had a chance to work with them on sort of draft this resolution. And I'm here to answer any questions as best as I can with y'all.
Thank you, Commissioner. And that's Christina Setlow. She is our new Director of State and Local Affairs. She previously worked at Council for Chairman Mendelson, but she is now here at the university working on behalf of our only state university in the district.
Thank you, Juanita. Have we got any questions from the commissioners? Any questions from the community about this resolution? Hearing none. James, we don't have any questions or anything is there anything else you'd like to do with the resolution?
I would like to motion to pass resolution regarding UDC receiving additional capital funds, the mayor's budget. Yeah.
Second.
All right, all in favor, say
Aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion passes. The motion passes and the resolution is approved with ANC3F. Thank you.
Thank you very much, commissioners. We appreciate the continued partnership that we have with the ANC and look forward to great things to come. Thanks.
And thank you also for reaching out as well too.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the Levine School of Music permit.
Yes, good evening, everybody. So I think last month, Commissioner Tenderick graciously, while I was out, provided last month, the Levine School presented their presentation about some of the changes that they're making to the school. I think, we haven't had any public comment from the community. And so, I think we can set forth a motion to be able to vote on this, vote for the resolution around the Levine School. So, sorry, I'm a little tongue-tied and tired today. So there isn't a resolution. This is just for a BZA. So I think we just can now have it go to a vote. So
and so the BZA, can you remind us what the BZA is?
yeah,
for?
so and I don't know if there's a representative. I think Christine is on the line. So I don't know if you want to say 1 or 2 words about the BZA. Sorry, I'm
Sure.
losing it today.
No problem. And I'll be quick. I know it's been a long night. So we have a BZA hearing tomorrow. The school is located in the R8 zone, and that requires a special exception approval for a private school use. It was approved initially in 1994 with a 25-year term, which is set to expire this coming June. So that's why we're returning to the board, making some modifications to the conditions that were approved in 94 as well.
Thank you, Christine. Have we got a motion?
Motion to approve
Second.
request.
Any, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Any abstain? And the motion is approved for the Levine School of Music BZA.
And one last thing I will add is tomorrow, just for you, Christine, I will be sending in the commissioner's report to the BZA tonight, and as well, I think there's a testimony at 9:30 tomorrow that I will be attending in support of the Levine
Great.
School.
We appreciate all your time on this. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you. And moving on to the agenda, we have Flavor Garden Restaurant and Bar. Alcohol beverage permit.
Yes, thank you. So I'll take this one, Commissioner David. And so we have a new restaurant coming into what was the former Tesoro space at 4400 Connecticut Avenue. And I see we have Deirdre Holiday Williams here. So I will let her present. And so welcome, Deirdre. Please tell us about Flavor Garden.
Hello, everyone. I know it's a long evening, so I'll be brief. My name is Deirdre Holiday White. I got married last August. And I had a Flavor Garden. It was a smaller cafe in Laurel, Maryland. I closed it right before COVID hit, and I was just hoping and praying that I would find another awesome space. I came upon the opportunity. I have worked with Jamie Hauser, who is general manager of the Days Inn Connecticut Avenue before, years ago. And he came to me and said, if I was still interested. He knew that I had a space in Laurel, and I was very interested. I used to go to school over at Wilson, used to be Wilson High School. I went to Alice Steele Junior High, so I'm very familiar with the area. I've been over in that area for a long time. My father actually retired from Friendship Post Office over that area. So I've been over that way a lot. I love it over there. I think it's a beautiful area. My sister went to school not too far away from there. She went to Duke Ellington. So I am very familiar with it. I have just been greeted with, I just briefly talked to Monica. Gloria Garcia has been great. Everyone over in this area, I'm just really excited. It's going to be American cuisine, going to be very family friendly. I want everyone in the community. I know the hotel had a couple issues, but I want everyone to be, I want them to understand, and it's going to be an inviting space. Yes, there will be a bar, but I am planning to close around like 10 Fridays and Saturdays. So I'm just hoping that everyone approves this alcohol permit.
Thank you. So tell us a little bit about the menu. I'm just curious. You said it's American food, so.
The menu is going to be have a lot of sandwiches. It's going to have salads. For right now, since I'm starting out, I'm going to do like a blue plate dinner menu. There'll be entrees a different entree every day. And I'm also known for, if you ever look up Flavor Garden online, I'm also known for my funnel cakes. So I will have funnel cakes along with ice cream. I'm definitely gonna have a bar for the adults. Even gonna do some boozy milkshakes, if anybody's ever heard of those. So I'm really excited. I had a big following when I was in Laurel. A lot of my friends and family are excited. I'm going to open again, and I hope to see everyone there.
When does it open again?
I am actually, I got my certificate of occupancy now. I'm just waiting to get inspected. And then now I'm just waiting on the alcohol permit. So I'm hopefully in a couple weeks, I guess however long it takes for the, you know how.
What will be,
So
what will the serving hours of alcohol be during the week?
During the week, I am 11 to 9. And then the weekends, Friday and Saturday, it will be till 10.
And that's for the bar and the food.
Yes. Alcohol, no, I'm sorry. Alcohol stops at 9, but food will go till 10.
So since you're hoping to be able to open in just a few weeks, are you looking for a stipulated license?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so we'll make sure we address that as well.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Certainly, certainly. And I got your settlement agreement. We exchanged some emails where you just need to put in the occupancy, just fill in the form again with the occupancy numbers for the indoor and the outdoor.
Okay.
And we'll just get that squared away and we'll get that sent in. And then with a stipulated license, Chair David will sign a letter in support of that, assuming we vote in favor of this, which I'm sure we will. And we just get that all sent over to Abro for you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions?
What's the occupancy of the outdoor seating?
Oh.
I believe 24. Total of 77 inside and out.
Any more questions from the community? Any other questions from the commissioners? Hearing none, is there a motion?
So I would like to move that ANC3F approve this request for a stipulated Class C license, I think this was. I forgot to look it up.
Yes, yeah, this
Stipulated Class C license for Flavor Garden.
Second?
Second, okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain? The motion passes. Congratulations.
Great.
Deepa.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Can't hardly wait.
Thank you.
Yes.
Moving on to the next item in our agenda. And the final item on our agenda is the Italian bar.
Yes, and let's see, I don't see Carolyn here. Who do we have here for
He's raised his hand.
yeah, Dan, I guess you're representing Italian Bar?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Yes, thank you for having me. Yes, I'm a counsel for Italian Bar. Carolyn, I think was planning on joining. I don't know if she had a family issue that popped up, but I'm happy to handle this for her if need be.
Sure. So just quick background. So the Italian Bar is the space next door, a couple of doors up from Americano. We approved the ABRA request for them back in the fall. And so now they're come here for a public space permit for Sidewalk Cafe. And I will let Dan go into the details. I saw this popped up in Tops for us 2 weeks ago, and that's how I became aware of it. So Dan, take it away.
Sure. So this is going to be an unenclosed sidewalk cafe. I think I'm looking at the application details now. it's, I
Do you,
think a
do you
total
have
of,
anything you want to share? I mean, I don't know if you have any slides or anything you want to share.
let me see. I have it here. Is it possible to email it to you to have it
You can
shown, or?
share. You can share.
Yeah, I can share it. Let me see
Yeah.
if I do that from my phone. Let's see. I don't know how easy that's going to be.
You're doing it from your phone, so maybe not.
Let me just pull it up here. Yeah, I don't know if I can figure out how to do it from my phone. But what the concept idea is to have kind of a window at the exterior of the cafe. It's a European / Italian. Oh, there we go. Yes.
Yeah, I downloaded stuff from Tops, so.
Perfect. Yeah. Yes, that's exactly what I want to look for. So there, I think the application calls for it's a very small area, 4 tables, and just a window in between the areas for a gelato, and kind of have a gelato window where you can come up and order at the window. So not very extensive, just trying to utilize the small amount of sidewalk cafe space that's available.
And all you're doing is putting up a fence, or I guess it's a screen here, so so there's not going to be a deck or anything built. It's not going to be elevated. It's literally just going to be tables on the sidewalk. Is how I read this. Is that correct?
Correct. And yeah, a legally permissible maybe up to 3 feet to protect the tables against the sidewalk there.
Okay. Thank you.
Any questions from the community? Any questions from the commissioners? Hearing none, is there a motion?
I move that the ANC3F approve this request for a public space permit for an unenclosed sidewalk cafe for the Italian bar.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstained? And the motion passes.
Great. Thank you all very much.
You're very welcome, Dan.
And now
Looking forward to some gelato.
Same.
Thank you. We are now at the end of our agenda. Please join us again for our May meeting, May 17th at 7 p.m. Can I get is there a motion?
Motion to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Awesome. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? You can stay on. No. All right, we have adjourned. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.